welcome to another episode of the Cult Products podcast from Yaya. My name is Phil Keeney-Bolland, one of the founders of Yaya.
My name is Adam Yaya Durrant, the other founder of Yaya.
And that is something that we're going to remember to do at the start of every episode so that people know whose voice is whose and who we actually are. This podcast is all about helping B2B tech startup founders navigate their way through those early days, attracting early adopter customers, helping them figure out their brand, their early product prototyping, and how to attract those people and how to build a website. So today we are going to be getting into product. We've been talking about brand quite a lot, but we are going to start looking at how you create prototypes, how you do user testing, how you figure out what your product is, and we will start to get on to product market fit. And in this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about what we actually mean by product design, as I know this is often new to lots of people, and then how to do it, how it works, how to kind of get to that place where you have your first version of your product and what you can do with that. So before we get into that, Adam, how are you doing? I mean, I see you every day and speak to you every day, so
I'm very good. I'm good. I'm looking forward to tackling another subject, and yeah, all very excited because obviously, well, I don't know when this is being released, and we will find out. You would know if England have won the Euros by then. So I'm very excited about watching that game. Yes.
Very good. Very good. What will you be doing for the game? You're down in Kent, so imagine it's a very, very kind of passionate spot for watching England games.
Yes, passionate. Yes, for sure. Usual stuff. Hopefully we get some good weather so you can actually kind of enjoy it in the sun. But the usual stuff really. Friends around, probably go to the pub. But yeah, all good.
Very good.
But yeah, fingers
Predictions?
crossed. Predictions are 1-1, extra time, England win. Maybe penalties. I don't know.
the classic grind out a win against superior opposition. Yep, I'd agree with that. I think it's time for England to hate win a tournament and for everybody to really not enjoy the whole process of it. So, something we can all look back fondly on, not remembering how painful it's actually been.
Indeed.
Cool. All right. Shall we get into this then? So I think a good place to start would be to talk a little bit about what product design is. And I don't think our intention here is to give everybody a university degree in product design and user experience and all of those kinds of things. But what's been quite interesting for me over the past couple of years working with lots of clients is lots of people have kind of different views on what the process of creating a product is and who should be doing what. And I do think there are different ways of approaching this. And I think that things have changed quite a bit over the past couple of years in positive ways, in that I think it's becoming easier for people to do a lot more stuff themselves that previously was quite complicated. And even, for designers in the time that we've been going, we've seen the tools that we use move on a lot from, I suppose you kind of at one point using the same tools for graphic design as product design, and now we've got like highly, highly specialized stuff, which is really cool. So I think a good place to start would probably be who does what and what is done by developers and where can designers add value. And Adam, I know that over the years, one of the things that we've sort of struggled with is what people think design is and how to talk about it, to the point where we just stopped talking about design and stopped actually using that word for a while, didn't we?
I think we removed it from our website completely at one point because it was becoming such a kind of pain point for us as a business. And I think that's kind of a general consensus around people's idea around what design is, which is generally making stuff pretty and making stuff pop, and our kind of, well, our view on what design actually is, which is really kind of focused around users and solving their problems. So it was a very kind of interesting thing that we kept hitting on, that people were always putting us in a box in terms of what we did and the value that we kind of add to businesses. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah,
we do the popping and the making things look nice too, but that is a small component of it.
I was just about to say that. I think making things pop gets a bad rep, but I think is obviously making stuff look nice does have a benefit as well, and a practical benefit. I think people like using tools that look nice, but there is so much more to it, and I think I can think back over clients that we've worked with, businesses that we've helped over the past couple of years, and I think certainly where we've got to, maybe not where we started in terms of what role design can play, is I think there's a job that designers can do really well, which is helping figure out what the concept of a product is before you even start developing and building all those kinds of things. And that's not to say that there aren't engineers out there that can do those things. And I think with a lot of the stuff that we'll talk about, people will rightfully say, well, I know a engineer who can do this. And I think you're always going to get those kind of unicorn people, but I do think that it is relatively uncommon for somebody to be able to think about all of the things from kind of product strategy through to UX, UI, and also build the thing. I think in our experience, we've found that it is probably more common that people are specialists in a thing and have a kind of broad awareness of those other things rather than just being exceptional at all the different parts of that journey.
Yeah, I think that's kind of why we made the decision quite early on not to have a development arm within our business, for multiple reasons. But one, because we wanted to really focus and specialize in the design component of this, and not try and kind of be a jack of all trades and take on everything. And to be honest, we just don't have that capability or like that raw knowledge, deep knowledge and understanding that you need to have, and from an engineer perspective, we have a knowledge, but not the kind of the depths of development. I don't think we're both super passionate about that side of things.
No, yes, exactly. There's definitely a point where our skill starts to comes to drop away. But let's just get into the conceptual stuff. So I think this is really important. And I think it's you don't have to be a designer to do this stuff, but you do have to do this stuff. Understanding what your product actually is the first step, and the way to do that is to start with who the users of that product are. And we've spoken about this in brand, about the importance of kind of going a bit niche, having a deep level of understanding of their needs, all of those kind of things, and how you serve those people. So there are lots of different types of research that you can do upfront when you're thinking about creating a new product, and they're all basically designed to try and understand those people as much as possible. I think when the kind of businesses we're talking about, where it's in that kind of B2B space, and typically, founders have worked in that space themselves. They kind of understand challenges that they were facing. They understand challenges their customers were facing, that their colleagues were facing, all that kind of stuff. That you can almost think about that as research. I think if you've been doing something for 20 years, you're going to have a level of understanding that is going to be, up there with what a designer would get from doing a kind of intense research period. Would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's having that kind of background knowledge is exactly what you need to have if you're setting up something, to really have a core understanding of all your kind of creating kind of personas and the detail that you need to have within that is kind of based on kind of experience and years of working within that industry. So yeah, I definitely think that helps if you're setting up something.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you can go out and you can talk to people, you can do lots of structured interviews, observations, things like that to supplement that, and that's what we would do. But interestingly, I think we were chatting to somebody the other day who was kind of a bit nervous about starting on this process and kind of getting it right. And to be honest, you know, I I used to really get a lot of anxiety about whether we could design the right thing and what was going to happen, because it is a lot of pressure, right? This is the kind of foundation of everything. Like, are you going to get product market fit? Are people going to be able to use this thing? Is it going to be valuable to them? But actually, I think, and this, I think this is a really important thing, is to just think about this like scientifically. And the best you can really get to, I think, is a good hypothesis of what the product should be and how it should operate and how people should use it initially. um, and I would say that when we've done that, what we can spend a lot of time researching. You don't validate any of that stuff until you've created a prototype and put it in front of people. And I would say, if I'm totally honest, when we do that, we typically find that it's more wrong than right, which actually, in a funny sort of way, removed a lot of the anxiety for me, because as I started to see this happen kind of time and time again, and you realized that it's not about getting it right first time. It's about learning enough to create a good hypothesis and then testing it and using the data from that to iterate and get to a place where you do have a concept that has product market fit and an interface that people can use.
I always think it's quite funny when you say that to clients, like, this is going to be more wrong than right. And they're always a bit like, oh, okay, a bit confused, a bit perplexed, but understanding that that's going to give you the kind of information and the right kind of guidance to enhance things is kind of key, really. So I always like it when we say that and seeing reactions to those things.
Yeah, I mean, it probably doesn't inspire confidence if you
No.
think about it as the end of the process. Okay, and I think this is a slight challenge with the kind of agency client model, is that and I think, again, another kind of important lesson for the founders that we're talking to here is, you don't want to just focus on the middle of the process, which is just creating a bunch of screens. You actually need to think about the two bits either side of that. So before you do that, understanding the problem space and understanding the personas really, really clearly. And after that is how you actually then take the data that you get from prototyping and testing and iterate. And so you can't see it as just a distinct project where you go, right, now we've got a bunch of screens and we're kind of done. That's the prototype. Now we're just going to build this. I think this is one of the challenges with this kind of model, because it's harder for an external person to do that third bit of the process, the kind of iteration and the learning as time goes on. So I think where design is really useful is at the start, where you're like, okay, we need to understand these people. We've got the research techniques to do that. We need to create that initial hypothesis. We need to build a prototype. We need to test it. And then we can make recommendations on how we evolve that. We call it a North Star a lot. What the kind of direction of travel is, what people really care about, some of the ways that we need to bring that to life functionally, some of the things that we need to be aware of. All of that kind of stuff is great. When you start to get into like micro iterations on things, I think it makes sense to not have external people doing that, because you do need to really, really live and breathe that, because those things become less obvious. They become, much more kind of, I guess, like fluid little changes that make a big difference, as opposed to the kind of bigger, broader strategic stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I don't think designers should be designing every single screen of a
Oh,
project. I
yeah.
think it's more
Yeah.
about setting the direction, understanding product market fit, and kind of figuring out what the
Yeah.
concept is.
I'm so glad personally that those days kind of feel like they're behind us, because designing every state of a button, or little kind of intricacies of pixel perfect detail, I think it doesn't get the most value out of what we offer and what we bring. And I think as designers, and I think now we've got so many kind of tools, and obviously we'll talk about those a bit later on. and resources to kind of help build frameworks that developers can make more kind of informed design decisions without the hand holding of a designer. I think there's kind of like almost now like there's a clearer kind of I guess clearer divide of where like divide between design and development, and I think that's partly because we've got actually more transparency between ourselves, like tools like Figma and things like that have kind of overlapped, but also like we're not kind of needing to get into the weeds of stuff anymore because we can build those systems and things that developers can use and make kind of those decisions themselves. So yeah, it's good that we're kind of stepping away from that world and moving into a world where we can add more kind of value at the top.
Yeah. And I think when you get into actual product building, the designer's role just become more about empowering the developers to do as much stuff as possible by themselves. So, that if you've got designers designing like login screens and flows, I think that's kind of a waste of time, because like those patterns just exist. Users are really familiar with them. You can literally copy paste them and change the colors of them like that. There's nothing shameful in doing that. I sometimes feel like, I feel like it's taken designers a bit of a journey to get to that place where it's like it's okay to be hands off and do that kind of stuff, but you're not adding any value doing that stuff. And similarly, you're not really adding any value if you're, thinking about initial prototyping. You're kind of building too much of that stuff. It can sort of feel easy to do and like gets a bit of momentum going, but it's not really. Go back to this as a hypothesis that you're testing. Like, it's not important to test whether a user can log in. It's better to focus on the thing that actually is the core of the product and actually does make a difference to whether people are going to adopt it and use it or not. Like, get rid of all the sort of well-established trivial stuff. And then I think through like design systems and component libraries, just providing assets to developers so that they can build their own screens quickly and do stuff. That's good if you can do as much of that stuff as possible. So that could be 80% of the build, and then there's 20% where you're like, this is actually complicated, and we need somebody to think about the user experience in detail and do all this, more complex design work. That's where you're really adding value. So I think, to bring this all back to the founders and what you kind of need to think about in early stages, and perhaps how you can kind of operate a bit more like a designer, I think you've got that kind of research and understanding the persona stuff. Now, if you've been doing that for your whole career, you've probably got a lot of that. But, it's always a good idea to broaden your horizons out and speak to more people, just understanding their challenges and whether their challenges are your challenges, and, as much of that kind of stuff as possible. Typically, we see people have a concept in their head and often a drawing on the back of a fag packet or something that says, here's like a couple of screens that kind of bring it to life. And if they don't have that, it's kind of easy for those people to draw that stuff out. Focus on the core of the product, not the incidental stuff around the outside of it, like login screens and all of that kind of stuff. And treat it like a hypothesis and say that I know this is probably wrong, but in the course of doing this experiment, I'm going to find out how to make it right. And I'm going to see it as a continuous process that's going to take a bit of time to go from mostly wrong to mostly right. And then I think you can try and transition as much as possible into development so that the continuous iterations of like, are the buttons the right color? Are they in the right place? Most of the problems that we find with stuff are related to UX copywriting. Like, probably about 70% of things you learn just like the way you've written it doesn't make sense. It's not even a design thing. Those kinds of things, like that can be done more in a development space. But there is no point going into build with an idea that you're not confident in, and with an idea that has huge preventable mistakes or errors or things people don't understand, because it costs 10 times more to fix those things in development than it would in a design environment.
Yeah, 100%. And to kind of add to that, like, you've got tools now, you've got design systems, you've got components that you can use to kind of get ideas and get test features across, and not worry about the kind of UI and look and feel. And that's kind of quite hard sometimes when you're in that kind of prototyping mode to just think purely functional and purely about the features and the things that you core bits of the product that you really want to test, and not worry about how the look and feel is. And we say like to like our designers, like don't design this, like you're testing the function, you're not testing the look and feel. That is super important to the product, but at this stage it's not really imperative to getting out there quick and getting that feedback as soon as possible from your users.
Yeah, that is a great point. And I think let's take a quick break and then we can pick that back up. All right, welcome back. And we have spent the break. Adam, do you want to tell the listeners what we've spent the break doing?
Right. Well, I live by the coast. I live in a place called Margate, and you might have heard in the first part of this, and so hopefully our producer Alex might have cut it out. Some squawking. I've got a seagull that comes to the back window every day and literally headbutts it until my two little cats come running, and then they just spend about, I don't know, half an hour just talking to each other, basically. Very, very strange. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the seagull wants. Food, obviously, but I think they just like hanging out together. But yeah, it's quite a strange occurrence.
And it's the same.
It's the same guy.
Same seagull every day.
Yeah, same seagull every day. It comes around about the same time as well. And yeah, he's leaving some good marks on the window, which is great. So yeah, I don't really know what to do because they're pretty bold and they don't seem to scram. It's just part of the family now.
Okay, right. Well, hazard of being in Margate, I suppose. Okay, so just before we took a break, I think one of the things we were kind of getting into is the sort of importance of being a bit kind of rougher with prototyping, and I suppose what you touched on, going back to this idea that this is all an experiment, is there's a big difference between a prototype and an actual product. And I think one of the things that's really important that you said is the prototype is there to test a hypothesis. It is an experiment. It may end up being the basis of what the MVP product looks like and feels like and how it interacts, but it actually doesn't really have to be. Its purpose isn't necessarily to be built. And I think when you take that constraint away, or that kind of way of thinking, it makes it much easier basically for kind of anyone to do a version of this, and also like means you can do it much faster, puts less pressure on it being, as you described, absolutely pixel perfect, and by necessity changes the way you think about it so that you're thinking more about the things that you're trying to test and validate and less about the things that are less critical questions to answer. As a designer, how does that change how you think about the process?
I think it changes it dramatically because I think as a designer, especially like a visual designer, you're constantly thinking about the way things look and feel. You're thinking about how the brand needs to communicate through the product. So I think when you're taking this approach and you're seeing this as just as like, this is just rough, this is throwaway, this is something that we're just getting out there, it kind of definitely changes your headspace and mindset on it. I think I actually prefer it when we do stuff on paper and pen, like just like sketching things out, and just not using any color, just using wireframes that are mono, because as soon as you start putting color in as a designer, you start just thinking about how that should be used, and it becomes more kind of stifling in a sense. So yeah, I think, think about it really roughly, think about it as something that's like throwaway, and just get it into the hands of users really quickly. I always think the great thing about prototyping is, whether that's lo-fi or hi-fi, is that you kind of keep that kind of momentum and stuff going. I think as soon as you start getting into the more the technical elements of things, it gets a lot heavier and it slows down that kind of energy and stuff that you've kind of built up around something. So yeah, they're my thoughts on that.
I massively agree with you. And I think my kind of favorite tool for prototyping is just like an A3 pad of paper and some Sharpies. And I think that what that does is it means that you're able to just kind of scribble around with stuff, and like you can create stuff as quick as your brain can think of it, and then you can, chuck it away and don't worry about it and do another version of it. As soon as you start sitting at a computer and pushing pixels around, the way that these things are built, they start, is that lined up properly? Should that be this color or like this other color? And what that does is I think it really like slows down it increases the distance between your thinking and your actions. And there's this thing now, I'm going to bring it up, and I want you to remember, Adam, that we're trying not to swear on this podcast. There's this thing called auto layout, and it is great for building out products and things that you're actually going to be developing. It is killing creativity at an early conceptual stage. Adam, can you just explain what it is and try not to swear, please?
No, it gets really under my skin, because as Phil said, it's a brilliant tool for building and scaling products and scaling design systems. But it's kind of like robot building. It zaps out all the kind of creativity, because everything is built in a system and to a grid, which is great. It's brilliant. It's what you need in further down the line. But when you're just being rough and you're trying to get ideas and creativity across, and it just stifles all of that. It's kind of like the vacuum of creativity. It just kind of sucks all that energy up and puts it into something that's very constructed and conformed. And as you can probably tell, that I hate that kind of way of designing anyway. So and I'm not the greatest person at that. So it's brilliant, but it's not the right tool to be using at the start of a project where you're really just trying to get stuff out and do it quickly and rough and ready.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Well done for staying calm. I think it's a system of like rules and constraints, and it means it's very scalable, and you can copy things and you just make little micro adjustments, and it all reacts great. And there's a whole bunch of setup time involved in making all this stuff work. And that is the last thing you want when you are trying to come up with fresh ideas, because the human brain just doesn't work like that. It doesn't. You can't think about constraints and unconstrained thinking at the same time. It doesn't, like, even just explain it doesn't make sense. You have these two modes of operating: divergent thinking, which is effectively where you kind of take an idea and blow it up and expand it. And this is why in business now it's really trendy for people to say yes and not but ever in conversations. I'm sure you become aware of that. And convergent thinking, which is, okay, well, how would we actually execute this stuff and make it practical? And your brain literally has two modes, and you cannot do both simultaneously. And I think this is good news for founders who don't have a design background. And the reason for that is because it is better to just be focused on a piece of paper and a pen, or even, just really lo-fi spaces. I really love this tool like ScalaDraw because it's so easy, and it's, it all looks kind of sketchy and stuff. And, you're not worried about every single pixel. In some ways, the founders have a huge advantage over designers because, firstly, it's their idea. So they just get it, and they're in the detail of it, and they're thinking about it in a really involved way, which is what you want. And because they either like aren't aware of the sort of rules and grids and things and auto layout and all that kind of stuff that designers are concerned about, or it's like a level of capability beyond where they're at, and rightly so, they're unshackled. They don't have the constraints. And I think that is a good reason why it is sometimes much better for the founder to design the very first version of an interface and say, this is what's in my head, and then a designer can take it and can use their skills to enhance it.
Yeah, I was going to make that point earlier around founders being in a better position because of not having the constraints or not having that kind of, I guess, the weight of all that design experience and wanting to make things look nice and pixel perfect. So I think they are in the best position to be able to create that initial prototype and get that idea out. And all the projects that we've worked on, is the best products have come from when the founders had an idea and it's in some kind of form, and then we've kind of worked with them to make that into a reality, rather than I'm coming to you to tell me what to do from the off, and just takes a bit more time and to extract the essence of those ideas then. So yeah, totally agree with that point.
You really need to get to a place where you're having sleepless nights in a good way, because you kind of can't stop thinking about the idea. Or, you know, I often find that we'll have conversations and then it'll be when I'm kind of in the shower the next day, I'll think, it's just clicked and it's kind of come to life. And I think founders are doing that all the time. I don't think you need to worry about being good at drawing to do a good low fidelity wireframe. It's not really important. It can be all you're trying to do is get the idea across in a way that somebody else can understand. It's just about communication. It's not about finesse. And so if you're trying to get to a place where you have a prototype that you can test, where is the bar for that? Because you see a lot of people worry that they need to have something very, very kind of polished and high fidelity and beautifully prototyped. I would suggest that you could see a sketch on the back of a beer mat or whatever as a prototype, and you could test that. And I have tested drawings of things in the past. You can also, even you look at the kind of whole design sprint methodology, and what they speak about is just use PowerPoint. I don't like Canva myself, and I think part of that is because it just suddenly popped up and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, we use Canva now," and I was like, doesn't feel like comfortable for me. It's not what I would use. But if that is what you use and you can use it well, just do that. It doesn't matter how you get to this point. The point is getting to a place where your idea has come to life. You can show it to somebody and you can observe how they interact with it and how effectively it meets a user need.
Yeah, and now I think it's a great time because there's so many more like tools and AI tools in particular that are transforming your kind of rough sketches into something that feels a bit more real and a bit more tangible. And there's so much stuff out there practically which is advancing. Figma releasing new AI beta stuff at the moment where you can generate designs from text prompts, sketches that you can kind of scan in and kind of re-emerge as kind of UI components. So there's just a lot of stuff out there now that means that you don't have to learn a whole lot of stuff on how to use like the Adobe suite, how to use Figma and all that kind of stuff. You can do it very quickly. And I think that's really cool. I think it's awesome. I think it's really enabling founders and people with ideas to get them out in a way quickly. So yeah, I'm really excited about all this kind of automation and the AI elements that are coming out and assisting designers and people with their work. I think it's great.
It's very liberating and maybe even kind of like democratic, isn't it? To say now, if you've got a great idea for a business, if you're sitting there and you're like, okay, I've got a B2B tech startup idea, the ways that you can, it's now much easier to create that prototype and to bring it to life. I think you mentioned two things there. So there's Figma have just had their kind of annual conference and they've launched the ability to type in a prompt within their product and then it will build screens based off that prompt. That's obviously something that will get better over time and become more sophisticated and easier to use. But it cuts out whole swathes of the design process as it existed if it works effectively. And then the other thing that kind of wizard, which for ages I thought was called UIZard and just didn't quite get it. Yeah, a bit like the first time that I read Harry Potter and I didn't. I think in my head it was always like Hermione or something. I'd never met anyone called Hermione before. Don't get a lot of Hermiones in Newcastle. And anyway, Wizard, UIZard, is enabling people to just do sketches and take photographs of them and then turn those into high fidelity prototypes. And I think that's the trend. Like the trend is making it easier and easier for people to firstly design apps and things, but eventually probably just build those things as well. So
yeah.
To come back to where we started, I think where design as a skill set is really useful, and what the founders can kind of bring from that is less about pushing pixels around and more about having that mindset of, okay, hypothesis, prototype, test, learn, iterate. How you actually build those things is going to be evolving continuously. Those skills and that mindset, they're the real value add in this process.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's taking out a lot of the kind of repetitive tasks or the stuff that kind of takes a lot of time, which is just fiddly. Like for example, like stitching a prototype together. That will soon be able to be done through AI and Figma, which is a task which is pretty kind of arduous. Structuring your layers and getting everything kind of ready and tidied up, all these things which take time and have been done manually before. I just can't wait for it to be done at a click of a button, because they're the things that I detest the most out of design. And that again goes back to the point, it just gives you more time and more headspace to do the stuff which is more creative and yada yada yada. So I love it. It's great.
I'm excited, and I think it's worth saying that the best way to get feedback on something is generally to test a working coded thing. I don't have a preference for testing designed prototypes over a working thing. I think you get more meaningful feedback when people can actually see a thing processing and can enter their own data and do all those kinds of stuff. Where I think design prototypes are useful are now, clearly it's a lot easier for me to design a couple of screens that imply some sort of heavy machine learning thing or complicated AI stuff, because you can kind of fake it. So they're useful because you get feedback much more quickly on things that would be really expensive and time consuming to create. So you get all that validation before you actually make the investment. And I think that will kind of never change. So this way of thinking is all about new things, whether that's new ideas in an existing product or just new products entirely, which is why I think it's so critical at the start of, sort of a kind of startup journey. Don't just rush into let's start coding stuff as quickly as possible, but actually take a bit of time, make sure you do understand the user really, really well, make sure you do really understand the concept that you're trying to put in front of them and take the time to refine that and all that kind of stuff. Then push the button on developing something. And when you have something that's developed, start to transition that mindset away from design prototype to the actual working thing, but keep the mindset, keep the assumption that it's not going to be right first time. It is going to take a while to figure out this stuff. There are going to be multiple iterations of it. You do need to just stay relentlessly focused on the user, all of those kinds of things. And then every time you have a new idea, go back into that. Okay, how quickly can we get a thing into users' hands that feels real enough, whether that's a sketch, whether it's a PowerPoint, whether it's something you've done in AI, whether you've got a designer to mock something up in Figma. Like, doesn't matter what the mechanism of getting it into people's hands is. Just get it into people's hands as quickly as possible. And in the very early days, I'd say try and do as much of it yourself. because you understand the idea, and because right now, thanks to all these innovations, you can.
Yeah, 100%. Imagine the kind of prototyping part of it as being in a sandbox, playing around, testing ideas. Some things will stick, some things won't. And then when you move into the MVP stage, obviously that's when you are developing stuff, but it's still something that's kind of hasn't got all the features, all the bells and whistles. It's very minimal. And you're looking for early adopters to provide that kind of feedback so then you can enhance it. So yeah, I think, the differences between the two is that obviously prototyping, you're not building anything code based, and MVP you are. And as Phil said, it is important to kind of start when you move into that phase to test some of the actual like functionality and get that kind of real like enhancement from the prototype. But yeah, it doesn't need to be this big cutting ribbon. We have everything created in this product, because that's just not how it works. And it's just not the best way to get the right end product anyway.
Yeah. One final thing before we go that I wanted to touch on is we've talked a lot about actually creating a prototype, and just a bit on what should you actually do with that. I think there are kind of two ways of thinking about this. You have very formal, structured user testing, which I definitely would recommend that you do. And then you have the slightly less structured, less formal, just getting feedback on it in the course of sales conversations, and just showing it to people and seeing, whether they bite, I guess, and whether it's something that they're kind of interested in paying money for. And I think both are relevant. I think the first one, it's very easy to say, okay, this is all the feedback that we got from this process, and it's as it is structured, easy to kind of interrogate and know what to do with it. If you're spending 6 months talking to various different people in sales conversations, you have to make a call on which bits of feedback to listen to, and it can be driven by commercial imperatives as much as user friendliness and all of that kind of stuff. So it's, by its nature being less structured, it's a bit more kind of subjective how you treat that stuff. But we've seen both work really successfully, haven't we? I mean, we've had projects that we've done where we've built a prototype, we've user tested it, it's immediately given us a bunch of stuff that we can work on and iterate. And we've had projects where we've created a prototype and the founders have taken it to customers and used it to get an idea of what their first sale could be and how they're going to get early adopter people over the line. So there's not, you probably realistically want to be doing a bit of both, I would say, wouldn't you?
Yeah, the power of the prototype. Yeah, I think it's definitely a bit of both. I think it's really hard. We've spoken to clients who have kind of raised a lot of investment through just like something that we've created in Figma, which was kind of hard for us to get our head around it. At one point, we're like, wow, we just designed this in Figma over a matter of weeks, and it's they've managed to raise like X amount of millions off the back of this thing that we've done, which felt kind of insane at the time. But now that's they're so convincing. It gets across an idea. In fact, it's validated with kind of user feedback. So yeah, I think it's a completely different mindset to, I think, the old mindset where you had to kind of go through an arduous, 2 years of building and designing and then getting it out and then finding out whether it's actually something that people want to invest in. So yeah, it's a very powerful tool, and one that can definitely help for either raising or getting to the next stage of your development.
I think with the with that sort of sales-led approach, you're taking a prototype and having conversations with people. It all comes back to that quote, which I think is attributed to Henry Ford, about if I went and asked people what they wanted, they would have told me they wanted a faster horse. But of course, he comes out with the car, and people find it very difficult to conceptualize things that they haven't seen before. The whole point of creating a startup and a tech product like this is to create something that people haven't seen before. There is something that really changes the way that they do their jobs and the way that they, kind of live their lives, I guess, to get very grandiose. And the only way you can really get meaningful feedback on that isn't really to ask people, what do you want, or like, would you like it if we did this thing? It's to actually put something in front of them that makes it real to them, makes it easy for them to understand what the concept is, and then provide feedback on it that actually is based on what would you do when you actually interact with this thing and it exists, and that is what you're trying to do really when you build a prototype and then take it out to people to have conversations about. And I think the more structured user testing stuff, so one of the things that we often end up talking about when we say we want to do qualitative user testing and we're going to recruit 5 people and we're going to take this prototype, we're going to sit down with them. First thing is, a lot of people say, well, 5 doesn't seem like a lot of people. Well, there's a lot of research on why it should be 5, and there isn't a huge amount of benefit in going above that. I don't think, and there is data that backs this up, because if you've got 4 people telling you something doesn't work, I don't need another 6 people to tell me it doesn't work, and just know it doesn't work. And similarly, for stuff that is kind of valuable, it gives you a good indication of what people care about. Now, there is obviously a place for quantitative user testing, and high volume stuff is great, and you can do a lot of like refinements and things with that. I think that's where it becomes useful. But for me, there's no substitute for actually going and speaking to people and putting something in front of them and hearing in richer, colorful language how they think and feel about a product, and inferring from that what are the things that they really care about, what resonates really well, and where you should go with that. So let me put it this way. If you said to me, if I was building a tech product and I could only do one type of research, the type of research I would do is prototyping and user testing. In experience of doing all the projects that we've ever done, it is the thing that generates by far the most meaningful feedback, the most actionable feedback, all of those kinds of things. And I normally wrap into that user interviews and user testing in the space of like one hour. And perhaps in the next episode, we'll talk a little bit more in detail about kind of how to do that kind of stuff. But I think all that other stuff has a place, and it's valuable, and it complements and adds to this stuff. But I think if you only do one thing to validate your idea, getting it in front of people and doing qualitative user testing with a small group of people is the biggest bang for your buck, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I am going to ask you a bit of a challenging question to that. What is your thoughts? Because we've talked a lot about kind of tools and AI and how that can kind of enhance productivity and how we tackle stuff in design. What's your thoughts on AI in the research sphere? Because you use it a lot for helping to do competitor analysis, helping to define personas, but also AI can now simulate in terms of user testing. And what's your view on the kind of testing it essentially in a simulation to kind of testing it kind of raw and live and getting that kind of more, I guess, color and feedback? Probably just answered the question there, but it'd be good to get your view on that.
This is a great question, and as always with innovative stuff and AI in particular, I'm very open-minded, and I do believe that eventually these things will start to take on a lot of the more manual stuff that we've been doing. But here's why for me, I'm still doing things in a more manual way, having tested some of these things. The first thing is, I need to get deep into the space that we're working on and testing to be able to design things effectively. And I need to be able to build up that empathy with users, and I just don't get the same level of connection to the problem or to the people or to the product from a load of AI generated text as I do from actually like sitting with those people and spending time with them and absorbing what they're thinking and all of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the first thing that I think, if you do that qualitative stuff, you then it's easier for you to become the voice of that customer. And I don't think AI quite does that in the same way. The other thing I think is, and this is linked, is you're taking in stuff all the time and combining it in the sort of melting pot of your head. So you're thinking about stuff as you're designing the prototype. You're thinking about stuff as you're analyzing the output from user testing, all those kind of things. And when I've used AI tools in parallel with my own thinking, and my own thinking is like super lo-fi. So I use a lot of post-it notes, and I move the post-it notes around and cluster them, and try and draw out insights from those kinds of things. It's the exact opposite end of the spectrum to just using AI to do it, but you can simulate some of that stuff with AI. I look at the output of it, and I think that isn't how I would cluster these things, and these aren't all the conclusions that I would draw, because I think it misses a lot of the nuances and context that you get as a human being. If I can sit and I can watch somebody on a Zoom call, I can see what their face is doing, I can infer things from the tone of their voice, I can take something that I thought about 5 weeks ago while I was doing some wireframing and combine it in my head with the thing that users said were on the call. And I don't think that at the minute you get that kind of depth. And I think the third thing I'd say about this, and this is where I think it gets slightly challenging, is I don't wish to be arrogant about this, but this is my job, and this is one of the things that I do well. So my level of skill and craft at actually doing user testing and drawing out the insights from that and all that kind of stuff is higher than somebody who doesn't have all that experience and it isn't their job. So there might be a use case for AI for somebody else who isn't me that like isn't really relevant to me. And something is always going to be better than nothing. So at the minute, and this probably will change, I'd back myself to be able to run user testing and draw insights out more effectively than AI. But that might, but that will probably change over time. And there are lots of people who don't have the same level of experience as me, for whom AI is a really powerful tool to get them to a much better level than they might be able to do purely themselves. Although I think it's not that hard to train people to do this stuff really effectively.
Yeah.
Which is why we are creating a product that helps people to do this stuff more effectively.
Indeed. Well done. Brilliant points there, by the way. Really, really good. I really think it's in terms of like the softer stuff, the stuff that you can't kind of get from building out a persona and then kind of generating hypotheses through AI, you won't be able to get through having a Zoom call with someone directly and being able to see their body language, be able to like kind of build on a conversation with them and really kind of them feeling comfortable with you to give certain feedback, which I can't see how an AI simulator would do that. But as you say, we're still in the beta stage of all of this. So it's interesting. I think researching tools are good and useful, especially for stuff like competitor analysis and things like that. But with all this stuff, it's just kind of, how you use it really, and knowing that you're the expert in it, or trying to be the expert in it, and using it to help guide you, but not completely direct you, I guess, is probably the right thing. But no, really good points there. But it is interesting.
I absolutely agree with you that there are lots of actually AI research tools, and things like ChatGPT are amazing. I think I listened to Rory Stewart the other day said that it's like having a graduate student sat next to you doing research for you, and you still have to make sure that it's not hallucinating. But I mean, using it in that way, I think is really useful. Okay, so should we wrap up then? What do you think are the key takeaways if you're listening to this as a B2B founder? This is just scratching the surface of product, and we've got more to come on this. What are the key things that you think we've covered today?
I think I think definitely about being the word that we like it. Yeah, we're liking it in cult products at the moment is janky, which means like kind of creating something that's just kind of put together. It doesn't have to be kind of refined and look like a real product at that stage. So prototyping, keeping it rough, getting ideas out early, testing those ideas, validating those ideas before moving on to the next stage, which is the MVP stage, where you've got something a little bit more kind of robust and something that's been effectively coded, but still keeping that mindset of iterating, testing and learning, going back to the sandbox, doing more testing. And I think, Phil said a great thing there about it being, thinking about the whole thing as an experiment, as a science experiment, is exactly how you need to look at it. And that will essentially, with a science experiment, you've got that capability to test and learn and develop and not think too much about what that end thing is at that point while you're learning and evolving it. So yeah.
Excellent, very good. And I think for me, it is about having the confidence that as a founder with no design skills, you might actually be better placed to create a better first prototype than anyone else in the world, if it's your idea. Secondly, thinking about it as a science experiment and managing your expectations that you probably are going to get a lot of critical feedback on things that you need to change, rather than validation that everything's great and you're doing a fantastic job. And that's exactly what you want, because it's a continuous process. Don't worry if you can't draw, if you can't design, if you can't do any of these things. There's loads of tools out there that make it easy for you to do something that will get your idea across and give you meaningful feedback on a prototype. And then there's no substitute for sitting down with somebody for half an hour and observing how they react to it and trying to empathize with those people and understand what that feedback that you need to go and action is. So hopefully that has been useful and people will get a lot out of that. I think we're probably done for this week. What are we plugging this week?
Well, I think
what are we peddling?
What are we peddling? Well, we have mentioned quite a lot of tools and products. So I think we'll definitely put those in the in the detail section, so people can kind of have a look and explore some of those things that we've talked, like UIZard and co. But what are we plugging, Phil? We're going to be plugging cult products.
Yeah, we are. So to help with the prototyping, we've built out a toolkit of components that people can use with Wizard, UIZard. And we will put the link in the show notes to where you can go and you can download that. But also go to cultproducts.yaya.co for more information on all the stuff we're doing around this right now. I think that is probably it in terms of what we're plugging. Go on.
Well, we are kicking off our first kind of real school round next week, aren't we? With people who have the kind of first in class on our beta cult products academy, if you will. So yeah, excited to get to know the people in that course a bit more and understand their products. So yeah, it's a exciting couple of weeks for us coming up, I think.
Yes, that's a good point, and we'll be able to give an update on how that's gone in the next episode. Great. Okay. Well, like and subscribe and share and review and get a tattoo of the logo, please. And we will see you next week. We'll find out whether England have won the Euros.
Come on, boys.
Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot. See ya.